Caden turned out to be quite the dance partner. He was very light on his feet, and Hannah enjoyed the bit of challenge that came with keeping up with him. They actually danced through 3 songs before either of them claimed to be tired, and when they parted, Hannah secretly hoped she'd get to meet him again. "So where are the others?" Hannah asked when she rejoined Jade. "I would have thought they'd be here dancing." "They were," Jade shrugged, "but they disappeared over that way. I think there's a tavern there, and you know how Owen is about drinking contests lately." Hannah rolled her eyes. "He's got a bigger ego than me," she said. "It's unhealthy, I tell you." Jade laughed, but stopped, and suddenly had a look of great concern on her face. When Hannah glanced over, she saw that Jade's eyes had turned very dark and glazed over. Hannah had seen this happen only a handful of times, but she knew what it was. As a Rathrin, Jade was granted certain abilities that would supposedly help her become one of the lofty, pompous bigheads that she really didn't look up to. The talents varied with each Rathrin, and Hannah didn't know all of them. She only knew that sometimes Jade had visions of the present in another place, and, rarely, visions of the future. After a moment, Jade's eyes cleared, and she shook her head slightly. The concern did not leave her face. "What were you expecting the lot from Surtish?" "When were you expecting the lot from Surtish to arrive?" she asked Hannah. Hannah thought about it. "They're meant to leave today, so they should be arriving by the end of the week, just in time for the summer solstice festival." It was roughly a 4-day journey that Lawrence, Isabel, and Georgiana took to get to Hearseth. "Why?" Jade glanced around and lowered her voice. "They're just rounding the lake, and by the pace they're going, they should be at the castle in less than an hour." "What?" Hannah pulled Jade into a side street that was much less crowded, all thoughts of festivity forgotten. "What did you see?" "I don't know exactly," Jade stressed. "They were pushing their horses fast, and they were riding along the lake. All 3 of them looked exhausted." "I'm going," Hannah announced. "It sounds like trouble, and I should be there in case I'm needed." "To do what?" Jade questioned. "To stand around looking helpless? What if one of them is hurt? What if—" "I don't want what-ifs," Hannah said stubbornly. She was already heading toward the pasture where she left Alonzo. "I have a duty outside of being a mage, and I intend to fulfill it. Besides," she rounded on Jade and sighed, "I'll do what I can to help them, even if it's just calming the horses down. They're my friends too. I can't just ignore them if they're in trouble." Jade nodded. "Ride safely," she said, giving Hannah a hug. Hannah darted off through the city, and as she and Alonzo sped back home, she explained what she could, and then spent the rest of the ride worrying in her own thoughts. "You're going to wear yourself out. Stop it." "I can't help it. I really don't want anything to be wrong." "And if there isn't, will you want to go back to Vorna?" Hannah thought about that. "No, or I'll stay to entertain them. It's been almost a year since they've come, so I'm sure we'll have a lot of talking to do." They were finally drawing near the city wall, and they barely slowed down as they passed through the large gateway. In fact, Hannah didn't call for a stop until they were into the castle courtyard. Hannah leapt out of the saddle and darted inside, ignoring her aching legs and shouting for someone to care for Alonzo. She headed along the quickest route she knew to Julita's medical rooms, hoping that she would find them empty. She was, however, disappointed. In the biggest of the medical rooms, one well equipped for treating multiple patients, there was a flurry of commotion. Serving maids and Julita's apprentice were hurrying back and forth, carrying different things. Hannah's eyes became glued to the center of the room, where Isabel was curled up on the bed. Hannah swallowed hard, and prayed that Isabel's clothes were not stained dark with what she thought was. Julita was calling out for herbs and creams, which struck Hannah as odd, because the master heart mage rarely used them, only in extreme cases. Looking around the rest of the room, Hannah was somewhat relieved to see Georgiana and Lawrence both relatively okay. Lawrence was sitting with his head in his hands against the wall closest to Hannah, and Georgiana was sitting on another bed holding a cup of steaming tea in trembling hands. They all 3 of them looked like they'd been ridden through hell. "I need some tweezers," Julita commanded in a firm tone. "There seems to be a bit of the blade still inside, It has to be removed before anything else. Hannah numbly stepped into the room and sat beside Lawrence. She was stabbed? Hannah's voice was hardly louder than a whisper. Lawrence nodded grimly. We were ambushed this morning right after breakfast. It's a miracle we made it here all in one piece. He didn't offer any further explanation, and Hannah was grateful. She didn't want to hear it. Instead, she simply slid her hand into Lawrence's and gave it a gentle squeeze. His grip became vice-like as Jolita began using her tweezers to dig in Isabella's side for whatever remained of the blade.